Yeah, it's being you say it's over. It's I'm joking. Great story. Yeah, he just submit it. And then it just got blown out of the water. Draft was strike out under line. I remember.
I was like, I got my place. I don't want to fall.
Right. Barbie. No way. Really?
Yeah.
Like last time, like it's like I'm industry. Figure that out. Yeah. Let's see. It's crazy. We take pride.
Yeah. And all the other days from.
It's every 3 years. Yeah.
It's a. I was just making fun of.
Yeah,
Nobody wears a watch
that was my
anymore.
nervous. I'm late. Checking my watch.
But you're not late. Right up to you.
You know, I'm one of those band parents where it's like early is on time, late you're dead kind of thing. That's sort of my general. Morning. How are you?
My daughter's been texting me. Yeah.
Is that coffee smelling?
Nobody does.
We're ready.
Okay. I do. I like actually being.
Morning, Chris. How are you?
Good morning, Citizens Advisory Committee members. In the absence of a chair, I am going to call the meeting to order. It's 10:02. Just going to read the really quick reminders. Good morning and welcome to the SJVAPCD Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation via Zoom and webcast. Before we begin, here are some important guidelines and general instructions before the meeting. Please silence your other communication devices such as cell phones. During the meeting, all public participants will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. Audio for members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. Okay, so with that, I am going to call roll. Mr. Cunha?
Yes.
Mr. Clark? Ms. Zimmerman? Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Horall? Ms. Lopes? Here. Mr. Hofdahl? Mr. Fippen? Mr. Savage? Ms. Pitt? Mr. Rios?
Yes.
Ms. Austin Tibbetts? Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Ms. Deming? Ms. Nebaker? Mr. DeHart? Ms. Holmes? Here. Mr. Liba? Ms. Agers? Here. Mr. Tristo? Ms. Fast? Mr. Tuttle?
Here.
Mr. Cryer?
Here.
Ms. Matthews? Here. Mr. Troost? Mr. Zachariah? Mr. Fisher?
Here.
Mr. Maderos?
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. With that, I will hand it over to Mr. Shake for item 3.
Good morning. Wanted to first welcome all of you here and hope you're all doing well. This is Samir Sheikh. I'm the Air Pollution Control Officer here, and I'll tee up the next item on the agenda, which is to consider election of a new chair for a 2-year term. I want to give you a little bit of background on the item and then turn it over to the CAC for discussion and potential action today. So again, just a reminder, Mr. Cantu, Ben Cantu, who has been serving as chair, has not been reappointed to the CAC. And so at the last meeting, you may recall that we appointed a chair for that meeting, kind of as we waited to see what the outcome of that situation was. It's our understanding that there still is not a meeting scheduled in San Joaquin County with the city selection committee to make that appointment. We don't know for sure in the event that there is a meeting anytime soon that he would indeed be reappointed to the CAC. So at this point, officially, Mr. Cantu is no longer on the CAC. There's certainly a possibility that he may be on the CAC later, also a possibility that somebody else may be appointed in that situation. So I think just out of the abundance of caution and just for good governance here, we're in a situation where the CAC does not have a chair. And so we've added an item to the agenda here to have the CAC consider electing a chair. A little bit more just background on the process for this. Traditionally, the CAC has done a rotation of the interest groups in considering chairs. So as the chair comes off the CAC, there are 3 interest groups on the CAC: industry, ag, city, and environmental. There's been, again, the practice has been that chairmanship basically rotates, from one industry group to the next. The prior chair, Mr. Cantu, served as a city role in that role. Served a little bit over a year, basically actually a year, with the January, coming this year without a reappointment. So technically served in a year in that role. And so it's really up to the CAC at this point as to sort of how to exercise your preference in terms of, where that chair goes next. I see basically 2 options here. There may be more, but the 2 options that I see would be for the chair to consider appointing another city person to that role. And that would be, by the way, it's a 2-year term. So the bylaws are very specific that when the CAC appoints a chair and votes on a chair, that the term is a 2-year term. It's not an up to 2-year term. It basically says specifically a 2-year term. So that the CAC could consider another person from the city interest group, or the CAC may want to consider, maybe rotating that over to the next interest group would be the environmental interest group. I think it was industry ag before city. And so now if there was a rotation on that, the CAC could move over to the environmental interest group. I think it's a little bit of a unique situation in that it's kind of a mid-year, midterm sort of situation, with that. That's why I'm kind of saying there's probably two ways to go about it. The bylaws are not prescriptive on that rotation, which is why I think the CAC certainly has flexibility in kind of picking, sort of where you go next. The bylaws are very specific about just the majority CAC voting on a chair, and that chair is serving a 2-year term. That's what the bylaws say about the chair role. So with that,
can I ask a question?
Absolutely. That kind of concludes sort of my introductory comments. So I'll open it up to questions. Yes.
Do we know if Mr. Cantu wants to be reappointed?
There's lack of clarity actually on a couple of key levels there in terms of when the city selection committee will meet, and also as to whether or not they're opening it up for reappointment. There's not a lot to share on that front. That's basically all that we know at this point.
I know
for sure, this one last clarification, and for sure he's no longer on the CAC because of that lack of a reappointment.
My preference would not to be immediately to appoint someone else because we've got this interim with him not being appointed. My preference would be to have an interim chair, at least for a couple of months to see what happens. And then if he gets reappointed, let him finish his term. Would that create disruption?
No, I think that, by the way, I just want to know, I don't know if Katrina was Chris Savage up in the north was.
Yes, yes, just for the record, he did arrive.
He's here at the meeting. No, I just want to, I guess I suppose the third option would be potentially for the CAC to continue having temporary appointments of chairs. I can't speak with any certainty as to when the city selection committee in San Joaquin County, would ultimately appoint somebody, who that person might be. And then really the question still in front of the CAC, which is that, do we want to move on with a rotation? Does the CAC want to appoint somebody again from the city interest group? These are you can prolong that discussion. I think the CE has the full right to. The bylaws do state, by the way, that at some point, if the CAC is not able to elect a chair, that the district would have to appoint a chair. There's an implication that there's an importance in having stability in that chair role. And so but I do suppose that you can continue to have, basically an item at the beginning of each meeting to appoint a temporary chair up until the point the CAC decides sort of where they want to go in terms of appointing a two-year term.
May I?
As opposed, if I could finish on, as opposed to appointing at the beginning of each meeting, we could take one action to appoint an interim chair for a period of, let's say, 3 months to see if he does come back, and then at that time decide whether we're going to fill that seat or not.
Yeah, I think that's a little, if I could respond, there's no chair, so I'll just jump in. And
I think we're all doing that.
Normally I'll say through the chair, but I'll just take liberty here to respond. No, I think that there's certainly some gray area potentially there. When you look at the bylaws, the bylaws don't lay out a process for appointing, say, interim chairs for periods of time. The bylaws are very clear that, basically the CAC needs to be appointing a chair for 2-year terms. Now, where I think it's gray is that it doesn't specifically preclude that from happening. Maybe, I'm looking around and the council is here if we really need to bring council in, but perhaps other members can also voice their opinions as well, as to whether or not, we want to move on with a chair appointment or not. And maybe what I'll do, if it's okay with the CAC members, as I see microphones turning on here and there, I'll just help facilitate a conversation here, and I'll take maybe one. I'm not the chair, but if you're okay with it, there's, I think, a question here from Mr. Tristow, and then I'll look around. If you can raise your hand or turn your mic on or something, I'll recognize the regions as well to get input from all the offices here. But Mr. Tristow, if you go ahead.
I believe a precedent in the past has been when the chair has been absent, that the chair of the special interest group that represents that will take his place. We've done that in the past when there's been an absence during a meeting. That has occurred.
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. In a situation where somebody's absent, but is still in the CAC, Mr. I just want to make sure everybody heard. Mr. Chief is correct that the interest group has been able to suggest a temporary appointment in that situation. This is a little bit different, but I think if you're saying that's a precedence that can be followed, I mean, that's something.
Well, I think my question is there a chair for the city interest group?
Currently, there is no chair for the city interest group.
Well,
and that's the vice chair.
Yeah, and we faced that situation, if you may recall, at the last meeting where this same issue came up, and at that meeting, the CAC appointed a temporary chair for the purpose of that meeting. Again, we had understood at that time that there would be a decision made in San Joaquin County, and it continues to be delayed. So I think that's where we are today.
Well, unfortunately, there's not a chair for the interest group, so we don't have an easy solution to this.
So maybe one, I don't see any mics on. I'm just looking around the cameras here, but there is one comment from Mr. Cunha. If you could raise, if I'm not seeing it correctly, if I'm just not seeing it, let me know. Maybe raise your hand in the other regions. But Mr. Cunha, did you have a comment?
Yeah, if there's no one in the north, I'll go ahead. But I'll give you that. If there's anybody in the north that wants to speak before from the Fresno group, I'm willing to wait. If not.
Manny, this is Mrs. Chris. Sorry, you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. And I did arrive a couple minutes late, but I understand the gist of where we're going. We shouldn't overcomplicate this. That would be my recommendation. The simple approach is if there's not a city interest group person willing to take over the chairmanship, and I think we need to be clear that's the case, then it rotates to the next interest group and they take over their 2-year term. I think it's really that simple.
Thank you, Chris.
Also,
Can I just state for the record also that Mr. Liba is in attendance also in the north?
yeah, Mr. Chair. I would, I think Chris is right. We can make this as complicated. What we got to remember one thing, we have to have consistency and we got to make sure we have our CAC meetings. We have to have these meetings, especially now of what's going on across California, the Air Resources Board, et cetera, et cetera. So it will be important to have a stability. So I'm going to jump right to it, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask, but I'm going to nominate for the city continual rotation for the 2-year term, Patricia Matthews. If she would be willing to take the chairship, it would be a 2-year term, finish her 2-year term, because that's the way it reads back in 91 or 92 when we formed a group, the Air District. So that's my motion.
I'll second that motion.
Excuse me.
I think we can open it up for, there's a motion and a second and definitely opportunity for discussion. I think I heard somebody in the microphone, whoever that is. If
I
you
think the South had some
South,
comments.
yeah, go ahead and jump in.
This is John Sanders, environmental advisor for South. And I would like to put my hat in for the chairman, whether it's interim or for the full 2 years.
A different category.
We can do whatever we
It's
want.
environmental.
Is there a,
Are there further comments, I guess, maybe before we jump into any potential action?
I move that nominations be closed and proceed forward with the vote.
I second that motion.
All right, so I'm gonna
Can we
around
have
here, got counsel here, make sure we take the appropriate actions here, but there's a comment here from the central, from Mr.
Can we
Maderas.
just have clarification? Are we finishing the term of the city group?
No.
No.
Does order with itself. I want to nominate Sanders. I second that motion for Sanders.
Well, before we have a motion and a second to elect Patricia Matthews as the chair. So that is the first motion on the floor that I think we need to take first. Depending on, how that vote goes, then you would go to, I think the next motion was
Right.
to close the nominations. And then the third motion was to elect John Sanders. So I think the second motion to close the nominations probably precedes the first motion.
We do need clarification on what the motion is.
Yes, and let me answer that question first. So the question on the floor here is the length of the term, I believe.
Yeah, are we finishing the
Yeah,
term?
and so when you read the bylaws,
2-year term. could be-
yeah, so it's a 2-year term, and I think that is consistent with the bylaws. The bylaws are very, and I'm happy to read them, but they're really specific on when the CSC votes a chair into a term, what the term is. The term is not up to, it's a 2-year term. So our read of the bylaws is that it would be a 2-year term, which is consistent with the motion that was made by Mr. Cunha. So we do, but it does sound like we have 2 motions on.
Yeah, so the secondary motion or the motion to close to close the discussion of the Patricia Matthews motion takes precedence. So you need to discuss and vote on that motion first. So I think that the clerk should call the roll on whether or not to close the nominations or close board discussion on the nomination of Patricia Matthews, or you can vote yes or no, yes to continue discussing it, or no to close it and vote on Patricia Matthews. And then
Excuse me.
depending on the outcome of that vote, then you can move to John Sanders.
John Sanders, the South. You know, my reply was before that motion. And it was clarified that I needed to be nominated, and we did nominate, but being that my reply was before that motion, I believe a nomination for me would stand.
No, yeah, I don't,
Besides the fact my hand had been up for 5 minutes while everyone discussed other stuff in the north.
thank you, Mr. Sanders. No, I do think that, I don't believe there was a second on that motion, and that's something we can, so I don't know that, it was effective, you know, until after, yeah.
The second didn't come because it was shot down. Fernando's here to do that. But it was cut off at the knees.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I'm going to make it easy for everybody. This does not need to be, we made it clear in my motion, it's to continue with the city process. Let that be the finishing of a 2-year term. Made it clear. I'm going to withdraw for the nominations to be closed. So we don't get into that argument. We don't need that. I don't need the North and the South. My motion was very clear. It's to continue the city, but with a 2-year term, and then the environmental will follow that. In 2 years, the environmental group will follow that. After those 2 years, then it will be the industry ag. So I'm going to withdraw my motion to close nominations. I withdraw my motion.
I withdraw my second.
Okay, so now we're back to the original motion being to elect Patricia Matthews as the chair was the first motion.
And the second motion was to elect, John Sanders as the chair from the Environmental Interest Group.
Right.
And so should we take the motion first?
I think, if you don't mind, the proper process for this would have been to call for nominations. And then nominations come to the floor, and then nominations are closed. And then there's a vote on the 2 candidates for, as I see it right now. Manuel, you had a motion nominating Patricia Matthews. Do you want to cancel your motion and just open it up for nominations from the floor?
Yeah, let's make it all simple. We'll make this thing easy. I will withdraw my motion to nominate at this point in time, Patricia Matthews.
I withdraw my second.
So now it will go back to, and if the young man in the, Mr. Sanders in the South will do the same, then we're going to open it for nominations, and that'll be the cleanest.
Okay.
So if whoever made the motion to nominate Mr. Sanders would also pull their nomination and have the second pulled, then we can open this thing back up to a very clean, easy process.
I will withdraw my nomination for Sanders.
And the second?
Well, he was, yeah, I believe Mr. Sanders, I think Mr. Sanders self-nominated, and then I think the second was Mr. Cryer, right?
Yeah.
So the second's removed, so I think that results in not having a full.
Right, and so now there can be a discussion of nominations.
So at this time, if nominations are open, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, so based on the committee member recommendation, I think that we can now all discuss nominations and take nominations.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to nominate Patricia Matthews for the continuing the business, but a 2-year term for the chair of the CAC.
And then are there any other nominations?
This is Orchel. I can nominate John Sanders for the
Okay.
Southern region.
So we have Patricia Matthews and John Sanders. Are there any, would anybody else like to nominate or?
If not, I would move to close nominations.
I second that motion.
Okay,
We have to vote on that.
do you want, does the board wish to discuss those nominations before moving to vote?
Okay, I'm looking around. I don't see any hands up in Bakersfield or Modesto or here in the Fresno office. Is there some? I'm sorry. Yeah, the screen's a little small. I apologize if I'm not seeing the hand there.
I tried to make my hand bigger, but it didn't work.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. I'm not, just Patricia is accepting the nomination, correct? Patricia, you're accepting the nomination?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I believe we can move
Okay.
towards
I
voting.
think I have to call for public comment first and then I can call for a vote. Are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any public comment in Modesto?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Fresno like to comment? Seeing none and none online. I'll call first for votes for Ms. Matthews or
Yeah, so I also want to be very clear, just for clarification purposes, this is just so you know, going into the vote, what the bylaws state. It's a recorded majority vote of the CAC in terms of what the threshold is for being elected. So I just want to just be clear on that point. And so with that, again, I'll just read the bylaws. The CAC chair shall be selected by recorded majority vote of the CAC and serve a term of 2 years. That's what the bylaw states.
Not a majority vote of the quorum, but a majority vote of the CAC.
Well,
That was my question,
it doesn't state here whether it's the CAC members that are at the meeting versus like but I think I would assume that it would be the majority of the members that are here today. But just give us a second on that front, just to make sure that we're on solid ground. Yeah.
We have, how many do we have on the CAC?
You have to count the vacancies.
13.
Out of the 15.
That's one interpretation. Yes. We're just give us a moment here to, yes.
Just for, in the past, it has been those in attendance, if we had a quorum. It has not been the membership as a whole.
We're just a quick update. We're taking a quick look at that, looking at past precedents, and I'll definitely summarize our conclusions on that here just shortly if you're wondering kind of what's going on. Just give us a couple more seconds. All right, just want to give a quick report. We're going to reconvene here, if you're all okay with that. Yeah, taking a look back at past precedents, and I think there's some confirmation here from a lot of the members that have been here on the CSC for some time, is that it's a majority of the members that are present here at the meeting. And we'll definitely, I think that is the principle that I would suggest that we use today. if there's any issues with that, of course, we'll let the CAC know. We'll do a deeper dive into this, but just going back and checking really quickly on the records, and also just, so if anybody has a different recollection, feel free to jump in, but that is, the bylaws are open on that front. It's not prescriptive. And so I think with that past precedence, we can work with that. Otherwise, there's a pretty high threshold actually that would have to be achieved. And often I think in meetings would not maybe even be achievable. So I think that's something, if anybody has any different opinions, of course, please jump in and feel free to jump in. But that's my recommendation for the CAC today.
Seems reasonable. I say, let's get to
Okay.
voting.
All right. Thanks.
Patty was first nominated, and then the gentleman in Bakersfield was second.
Okay. Or I can
That's
just
what I
call through the roll and you tell me who your vote
And I
is
think, yeah.
That way we can just
I'm
do
down
it
for a
in
roll call
one
vote if everybody else is.
consecutive.
So is everybody okay with Katrina's suggested approach for the vote here, where she's going to call roll, and then you can indicate who your preference is out of the two nominations that are available. Is everybody okay with that? If I can get maybe.
Seems reasonable.
Okay,
Yes.
I see nods so far. So, all right. Is everybody okay in Modesto as far as? Okay, great. And I'm going to go down to Bakersfield. Are you all okay with that methodology? I see a thumbs up. I think again, I got to check my vision. All right, great. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I will start with Mr. Cunha.
Patricia,
Thank you. Ms. Brown,
Patricia Matthews.
Ms. Lopes,
John Sanders.
Mr. Savage,
Patricia.
Mr. Rios,
John Sanders.
Mr. Sanders,
John Sanders.
Ms. Deming, Ms. Holmes,
Patricia.
Mr. Liba,
Patricia.
Ms. Agers,
Patricia Matthews.
Mr. Tristo. Your mic's not on.
I think we have two good candidates here, but to allow the city the continuity of continuing their term, I would vote for Patricia Matthews.
Thank you. Mr. Tuttle,
Patricia Matthews.
Mr. Cryer,
Mr. Sanders.
Ms. Matthews,
Patricia Matthews. That's weird.
Mr. Fisher,
Miss Matthews.
Mr. Maderos.
Miss Matthews.
Okay, the majority vote was for Ms. Matthews.
So I think we will gladly turn the meeting over to Chair Matthews now.
Thanks, I think.
And we'll make sure we're here to support you in that role. So we'll make sure anything you need.
If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I will now ask if there are any corrections or additions from the members to the minutes previously submitted for the March 4th, 2025 CAC meeting. Are there any comments or questions in Fresno? Seeing none, are there any in Bakersfield? Seeing none, are there any in Modesto? We'll call for public comment.
Okay, are there any public comments on the minutes in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any public comments in Modesto for the March minutes?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Fresno like to comment on the minutes? Seeing none and none online.
Okay, hearing none, the minutes are approved as submitted. Okay, we'll go ahead and move to Public comment. Is there any public comment in Fresno?
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and read this one. This time is made available for comments from the public on matters that are not on the agenda. It is requested that no comments be made during this period on items not on the agenda. The public may make comments on each CAC agenda item during the time allowed for public comments. Attention is called to the fact that the CAC is prohibited by law from taking any action on discussion of matters that are not on the agenda. Are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any public comments in Modesto?
No public comment in Modesto.
Any public comment in Fresno? Seeing none and none online.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move to chair comments. I don't have any at this time. Executive director comments.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick ones to make sure you have time on for the rest of the agenda here. Just a quick report to you on some of the activities from our last board meeting. We took an item to our board to provide an update on a cybersecurity audit that we recently undertook. The board authorized, and this is really actually the first time that we'd done a really intense kind of review of our cybersecurity systems, make sure that we're in a good place. We, as any public agency, but with a lot of our grant programs, other programs that we have, obviously have a lot of sensitive information here that in an environment where there's a lot of risk from hackers and others that try to take over these systems, wanted to make sure we were on good footing. The good news is that we actually had a really good audit that we were happy to take that and talk to our board about. A few recommendations that we're already in the process of working with, but overall, what we heard from the firm, that is very reputable firm, has done this for a number of other agencies, was that we were leading in terms of any other air district. They flat out basically just said that we have great systems in place and are working very aggressively to make sure that all of our data is secure. So I just wanted to let the CAC know that that's something that we take very seriously here. We also had a report to the board and to the public on our advocacy efforts on budget and some of the other priorities of the board, and the CAC has been really engaged on this topic as well. A lot of appreciation for the CAC in supporting programs like the farmer program, the grant program that supports our ag community in replacing equipment and doing it in a voluntary partnership-based approach. We're still pushing really hard. We keep hearing that it's a very difficult budget year. And you've got on top of that, the fires in LA and issues around high-speed rail and some of the other big things that are happening as well. So we are continuing to push and really do appreciate that continued support to make sure that we have decent air quality funding and other priorities addressed in the legislative session this year. And then lastly, wanted to just mention that we were able to recently relaunch the Drive Clean in the San Joaquin program, and are in the process and actually have events that are lined up over the next 3 to 4 weeks. It's actually going to be for a couple of months. We're actually going to have events in communities throughout the valley where we're going to be inviting residents back into this program. It was a program that we had to close at the end of last year because the funding had run out. We had a lot of demand in the program. We're able to work with the state to get some more funding that's going to last several months. And so we've actually already worked per board approval a couple of weeks ago to get a number of events lined up. They're posted online. We're going to work with Katrina to make sure the CAC members have the entire schedule available so that you can reach out to your constituents and let them know about these funds that are available for vehicle replacements. And so it's a good news story in terms of being able to at least bring some level of resources while we keep fighting for more money and in the state budget to support a very high demand program. So we'll make sure you get all that information, and please share that with your constituents. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair, and happy to take questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the north? Seeing none. Are there any questions in the south? Are there any questions here in Fresno? Is there public comment on this as well? Okay. Thank you, sir. We'll go ahead and move on to item 9, verbal report from California Air Resources Board with Laura Carr.
It's actually Mr. Benjamin is going to be joining for this update.
Mr. Benjamin.
Hi, good morning, Ms. Chair. Sorry for the confusion there. I'll be providing the update here this morning. I'm Laura Carr. I'm an air pollution specialist in the air quality planning and science division at CARB. I just have a very short update today. The CARB board met at the end of March. There was a consent item that had to do with San Joaquin, so I'll just provide the update on that. These were 2025 updates to the motor vehicle emissions budgets for the ozone SIPs. And so the board adopted these updated motor vehicle emission budgets for San Joaquin in addition to one other non-attainment area in the state. And those budgets are consistent with the SIPs for the 75 part per billion 8-hour ozone standard. The proposed budgets are set based on CARB's motor vehicle emissions model that's most recently approved by US EPA. So that's MFAC 2021. And the proposed updated budgets, motor vehicle emission budgets, will allow for future conformity determinations to be made using that most recent version of MFAC 2021. That's the only item that I wanted to provide an update on this morning, but happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. Are there any questions in the north? Seeing none, are there any questions in the south? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and bring it to Fresno. Mr. Cunha?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Laura, is Michael Benjamin on the call right now, or is it just you from CARB?
Dr. Benjamin is here as well.
Maybe Chair or maybe Samir. I would like to talk about the request of information that was brought up. Michael, when you presented the waiver document a month ago, which was well done, appreciate that. Would this be the item that we would to discuss the response that was sent to a CAC member? Or would we wait until item number 10? I'm not sure, Samir or somebody have a, am I overshooting the discussion item or does it stay here with CARB?
Through the chair, I think this would be, I mean, if you have any questions for CARB, traditionally this item's been kind of the item to have that opportunity to ask questions of CARB. They may, want to take them back or depending on what the question is. But yeah, item number 10 is really more focused on our work, on our updates on plans and rules. So I think you can use this item, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so Michael, my question is in the response that was sent by Octavio Haro, who is the Managing Off-Road Implementation Mobile Source Control Division. He had forwarded a letter to a CAC member that had asked a question about where does the forklift stand, being that CARB never got an approval of a waiver, never submitted the waiver, and was never approved to move forward with its rule. But yet in the letter, I think you saw it, Michael, that was sent was pretty arrogant, pretty much saying, we don't really care if we get a waiver or not. And we're going to go ahead and do a voluntary mandatory type rule. So when we finally do submit and get a waiver, then we're going to implement the rule and go back retroactively and then penalize people. I was really kind of taken back by a young man's authority to kind of take that stance against a federal law. And the waiver was put pretty much for California in the 1986 to the 90 Clean Air Act. The waiver agreement was really for Los Angeles and California, and California used the waiver quite effectively. And now suddenly that the waiver has not been granted or has not been requested by CARB and granted, that you would have a staff put this in writing saying, really, we don't care, we're going to do it anyway. The way I read this is very, very strange to respond to a person that asked a question by defying the law and not caring what is being said by the federal EPA. So I don't know, Michael, if this is your territory or if it's this Mr. Octavio Haro, H-A-R-O, discussion. So I don't know if you can answer anything, Michael, on that or not. And I know it's not your authority, but Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, excuse me. If this item can be answered or if we have to carry this item over. But I had the sad part of this thing, Michael. You're very fortunate, though. I will be leaving in 1 minute only because I have an immigration call that depends on the United States farm workers and other workers at 11 o'clock with several congressmen and folks. A video, not a video, a Zoom. So I have to be on that call. I don't want to get stopped by a highway patrolman. So I'm guessing on 9 minutes to my office. But so this can be discussed, Michael, or if you and the chair feels that we brought this up, the arrogancy, the attitude, we can talk about it at another point. I don't want to take up a lot of time because I know that we have other items to deal with, but I do want to address this item. I'm very concerned about this. I helped part of that waiver issue in 1990. And the waiver was for a purpose, but not to be used as a weapon or to be used to disrespect because one waiver is disproved. So you don't care if it's been disapproved. We're going to go do our thing anyway. The hell with you folks. Excuse my language, Madam Chair. So Michael, I will stop there. I apologize.
Do you have a response today, or would you like to bring that back?
I do have a response. I don't think there's a need for us to carry this item over. I will address it now. CARB is in active litigation regarding the waiver issue broadly, and the response from Mr. Haro, I would say, was respectful. I disagree with Mr. Cunha on his, I reviewed that email. I consulted with Mr. Haro. His response to Ms. Brown was reviewed by our legal staff. It is consistent with CARB's position. It is a very respectful email that provides a lot of information, as well as a direct contact for Ms. Brown to reach out to. So I think CARB staff have behaved very professionally in this regard, and I don't agree with the characterization.
I appreciate that. I don't know if every CAC member has received a copy of the letter, but I would ask the clerk of the board to make sure that this copy, I will leave it with you, or I will send you the full correspondence. Michael, I appreciate your professionalism, but I disagree totally with the language. And I'm glad we're able to agree and disagree. That's what's great about the United States. So thank you for your comment, Michael, to me in addressing that issue.
Are there any other comments in Fresno? Yeah, okay, so we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you for bearing with me, by the way. We'll go ahead and move on to item 10, update on attainment plans and rules. Tim? Oh, nope.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you. Emily Nealon, I'm the Director of Air Quality Planning, here again to provide you with a quick update. It's largely in line with some of the recent updates that I've provided to you all, but a couple of quick notes. At the couple of past previous meetings, I've mentioned that we were going through our data certification process for the 15 microgram annual PM 2.5 standard. So now the great update is we have now certified our data for the district sites. CARB is in the process of certifying the data for their CARB managed sites. And based on that, we have attained the 15 microgram standard. And so we are currently working with EPA for them to do a determination of attainment by the attainment date. And then in parallel, my team is continuing to prepare a maintenance plan. We're hoping to take that to the governing board this year. which will demonstrate continued maintenance of that standard for a 10-year period. And that'll allow us to officially be redesignated to attainment of that standard. So really exciting news and a great milestone for the Valley. Separately, we're continuing to work on our rule development efforts for our PM 2.5 plan commitments, for Rule 4901 for the fireplaces rule, and Rule 4550 conservation management practices. Additionally, we're continuing to work on our ozone contingency measure commitment rules, which is a series of 5 coatings rules that we committed to amend to include contingency measure requirements under the Clean Air Act. So just a quick update that we are working to identify some workshop dates for a couple of those projects, and hopefully I'll have some additional updates for you all next month. And that concludes my updates, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Emily. Are there any questions in the north? Seeing none, are there any questions in the south? Are there any questions here in Fresno? Thank you. Item 11, update on recent enhancements to the district's low dust nut harvester replacement program. Todd?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Todd DeYoung, the Director of Grants and Incentives here at the Air District. Just want to give you a quick update on some recent enhancements that we've made through our board in February to the district's low dust nut harvester replacement program. Just by way of a very brief background, over the past decade or so, the Valley has seen a significant increase in acreage devoted to nut crops in the San Joaquin Valley. And in response to that, the district and the USDA NRCS have been working in partnership to develop and promote a variety of best practices and new technologies for reducing emissions, primarily with the harvesting activities that go along with nut production here in the Valley. Our board's direction for the last several years has been to identify additional cost-effective measures for reducing, in particular, the particulate emissions, including the development of new strategies to reduce localized community impacts during those harvest activities. As such, back in 2018, our governing board authorized $2 million for a pilot program to evaluate and deploy new and emerging low dust nut harvesting equipment here throughout the Valley. Very successful program, and based on the success of that program, in 2020, the board established the low dust nut harvester program as a full-fledged incentive program. Since inception, the district has allocated almost $24 million in a combination of federal, state, and local funding to the program. Through that funding, we've replaced more than 270 nut harvesters with low dust nut harvesters. These are fairly large acreage units. The average acres harvested per unit is about 800, just over 800 acres. So these are used significantly throughout the Valley. They're used by a combination of growers and custom harvesters throughout the Valley. The funded projects, and I'll go over this in a little bit more detail, but we've seen some significant emission reductions, over 1,600 tons of what we call fugitive PM 2.5 from the harvesting activities, 423 tons of NOx from the replacement of older, higher polluting diesel engines, and 32 tons of combustion PM 2.5. Despite these successes, the program participation has declined over the past several years, and that's a variety of reasons. Lower almond prices in recent years have made growers and custom harvesters less likely to invest in this new technology, as well as higher equipment prices have also led to kind of a slowdown in the participation in the program. Some of the other practices that have been developed as part of the program include changes to sweeping and pickup equipment, which we're talking about in this program, head height modifications, the number of blower passes. We've seen a significant reduction in the number of blower passes, leading to some efficiencies and reductions in emissions from that, as well as reducing the pickup machine speed. So, the slower you go through an orchard, the less dust is created. And so with a lot of these changes to practices, we've seen a significant reduction in emissions coming from harvest activities. As well, the equipment manufacturers continue to push the envelope and develop new equipment that significantly reduce emissions. And that includes both pull behind equipment as well as self-propelled applications. The cost on these new pieces of equipment are fairly substantial. The pull behind, which don't include an engine of their own typically, range from $80,000 to about $150,000 on the high end, whereas the self-propelled units range from about $180,000 up to $500,000 or more for some of the more significant equipment. And what we've seen over the years is that the low dust variety of this equipment is typically about 15 to 20% higher than the conventional equipment would cost. So these are some program stats as of February when we took the changes to our governing board at the end of the third week in February. We had about $12.9 million left, and I'll go through kind of where we are to date in just a few slides. The funding is allocated based on first come, first serve, based on the submittal of a complete application, eligible entities like we talked about, growers and custom harvesters throughout the San Joaquin Valley. Eligible equipment, low dust harvesting equipment that has to achieve at least a 40% reduction in PM emissions, as demonstrated by peer-reviewed information or district-approved methodology. And it includes pull-behind harvesters, self-propelled harvesters, what we call shaker and sweeper replacement technology, which we're seeing more of nowadays, where they're actually replacing both of those activities with a single piece of equipment, leading to several efficiencies, which also leads to an increase in or a decrease in emissions from that technology. And then what we've mandated in the program is that the non-self-propelled, the pull-behind equipment that's used in the program has to be equipped and has to be used with a tractor that has at least a Tier 4 engine, which is the cleanest available diesel engine. So if you're going to buy a non-self-propelled or a pull-behind piece of equipment, you have to be using that with a Tier 4 final engine. Some other guidelines, eligible equipment. We're always evaluating new technology every year. The dealers are changing. The dealers and manufacturers are changing their equipment. And so we're always reevaluating this technology and including additional pieces of equipment in the program. Again, self-propelled must be the latest tier available. Generally, that's Tier 4. And then those pull behinds have to be towed with a tractor that has at least a Tier 4 final engine. The incentive amounts before we took the change to our board were 50% of the eligible equipment costs. And the maximum funding per unit was up to $150,000 per unit. Again, those were both amended by the governing board in February. And the funding continues to be limited to a maximum of 5 pieces of equipment per applicant. The old engine disposition, we crush all of the old pieces of equipment. We don't want these things finding their way back out into the field, so we make sure they're destroyed. We've got very robust policies and procedures that we follow, and they're very well documented to make sure that these engines don't end up back in the field at some point. The participants must commit to utilize this equipment. Generally, it's about a 10-year project life, and we'll require them to keep that equipment in the valley for up to 10 years. But there are some fleet-specific accommodations that we can make. And then they are subject to reporting and inspection requirements as part of their project. So here's just a quick list of the projects that have been funded to date. Again, over 1,600 tons of fugitive PM 2.5, 420 tons of NOx, and more than 32 tons of combustion PM 2.5. The overall program cost effectiveness, that bang for your buck, or the dollars per ton that we use to gauge the effectiveness of our programs. This is a very, very cost-effective program. It's about $14,000 per ton. And just by comparison, the cost effectiveness limit in the state's Carl Moyer program, which is sort of our benchmark for cost effectiveness, is up to $60,000 per ton. So this is significantly lower than that threshold. The table there just kind of shows the types of units that have been funded in the program. And so in February, our board did approve the following enhancements. Because the success of the program is based on sufficient incentives to growers, getting participation by Valley growers. This is not mandated. This is a voluntary program, so we need folks to participate. We need growers to participate, and so not seeing that participation led us to these changes that we're talking about today. And again, declining nut prices, higher equipment costs all sort of led to that slowdown. And so I will get to the improved enhancements. The first enhancement that was approved was an increase from 50% to a maximum of 75% of eligible equipment costs. Now, this really just kind of gets us back in line with our tractor replacement program or ag equipment replacement program that we've operated here at the district for several years. This kind of now is more in line with that program. And it also aligns with the current 75% incentive that's available through low dust nut harvester replacement in the AB 617 shafter community. And so the second thing that we did that was approved at the governing board meeting in February was to increase the cap from $150,000 to $250,000 per unit, recognizing that significant increase in equipment costs that we've seen since 2020, since the program was originally developed. And then the other thing that we did was we eliminated the current $150,000 per unit cap for what we call dual purpose harvesting units. They replace multiple activities in the harvesting process with a single unit. And in recognition of the substantial additional cost for those units, we eliminated that $150,000 cap for those pieces of equipment. They are still subject to the 75% overall cost cap. But we did reduce that or eliminate that $150,000 unit for those specific pieces of equipment. And so I'm happy to announce that since we took those changes to the board at the end of February, we have seen a substantial increase in activity. We worked very, very quickly to get the word out. It was actually the same day as the board meeting. We had our website updated. We had already been in contact with the manufacturers and the dealers throughout the valley. And we did have about $12.9 million available. And as of today, it appears as though we have enough applications in-house to spend that entire $12.9 million. And then any additional funding would be considered through the district's budgeting process that we're going through right now for the next fiscal year starting in July. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any CAC member comments in the north?
Through the chair is Chris Savage. Todd, thanks for the update. Always good to see these programs gain a lot of momentum. Can you remind me, these are Carl Moyer funds that support this program, or where the funds coming from?
It's a great question. Historically, it's been a combination. The original $2 million for the pilot program was actually local district funding because these projects were not eligible for any state funding at the time. Since then, we have worked hard with the state to get this program included in the Community Air Protection Program. And so that's a funding source that we've been using for the past several years, as well as some EPA funding through the Airshed program. So right now, what we're using is a combination of state community air protection or CAP program funding and the federal EPA Airshed funding.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't remember where it was coming from. Then the second question I have is, assuming you spend the 12.9 million, and I don't know how many projects that translates into, what percentage of the total harvester fleet will you have completed by that point? Do you know that number?
I do not off the top of my head. Smear's going to activate his microphone.
Through the chair, it's a great question. So we've been looking at this specific issue, and I've also been talking to organizations like the Almond Board and Western Ag Processors and others about the inventory of equipment. And we don't have a final sort of updated inventory, but I can tell you that it's in the couple of thousand range in terms of the number. So it's thousands of harvesters with a couple of hundred replaced that are definitely making a big difference, but there certainly is quite a bit of opportunity left to continue working with the ag sector to keep replacing those harvesters. And I've heard, I don't want to put too much of a final point on that number because I think we're still going through the process of collecting data and there's some surveying that's been going on behind the scenes to get a good picture, not only of the number of harvesters, but how they're used, how much, is custom harvesting, versus other forms of harvesting. And so we'll have a lot better information over the next year or two as we kind of think about this moving forward. So we are making a big dent in that fleet, but there's still quite a bit of opportunity left as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions in the north? Seeing none, are there any CAC member comments in the south? Seeing none, we have a couple of comments here in Fresno. Mr. Trusto.
Sure. Thank you. It was an excellent presentation. Mr. Savage asked the questions that I wanted to ask, so it was, but I do have one left. How many units do you think the $12 million from the application that you have will replace?
You're going to make me do some math.
I know
I
it's
don't
hard.
have the actual number of applications, but I would imagine each unit were probably, yeah, exactly. 75 to 100 would be, I would say probably about 75 pieces of equipment.
Well, I think that this is a wonderful program. And I think it bodes and speaks very well of the district's efforts that you change the qualification standards for it. And you hit the nail on the head. That's what appears in industry needed. And to get that many applications just like that shows that there's a line waiting for these. Thank you for your hard work.
And through the chair, I mean, one of the values, just real quick, one of the values of getting more of this equipment out in the fields is that there's a technology advancement kind of role in it. So it's not just that grower directly benefits from it, but when neighbors see it in operation and see the value, and there's some fuel efficiencies, other reasons, obviously lower dust. I think like the more it's demonstrated that, you get a broader sort of like level of interest as well, just seeing it working out in the field. So, and as we keep moving forward with the rest of the fleet, we're going to keep looking for enhancements over time. As you can see, we continually enhance the program and make sure it's responsive to where the ag community is at any given point in time. Thank you.
Mr. Medeiros.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. First of all, in harvest season, we all notice how much it changes as a result of the harvesting that's going on. But in your memo, I did notice that you indicated that reducing nut harvesting emissions in rural areas do not significantly impact the Valley's peak urban PM 2.5. Can you explain that somewhat? I mean, are we indicating that we all feel like there's a problem here, but in reality, there may not be a problem here? Is that
the chair? If I could, just a quick response to that. It's a great question. So there's some nuances here that, I think are worth just a quick overview. Almond harvest emissions are definitely a big part of what we call the particulate matter in the valley. Now, how those emissions manifest themselves in terms of, where the biggest impacts from those emissions are, I think that's the point that you're making that's found in the memo, which is that what we find is that, and we've done a lot of research on this over the years, what we find is that emissions, say from harvest activities like almond harvesting, there's deposition of those emissions, meaning that those emissions can carry over some period of distance. But as a lot of these activities happen in rural areas, and so when you look at some of the peak concentrations that you may have, say in the middle of Fresno or in other parts of the valley, the impact of those harvest emissions are lesser and lesser at some of those peak areas where a lot of those emissions are driven by things like mobile sources, maybe residential wood burning, which is declining, but maybe in the wintertime, and lesser by activities, say like harvest emissions. But you do see more of those impacts, say in some of the more rural communities, right? So it's a community level strategy as well as a regional strategy. It is important to the overall picture of the valley, but most of the impacts you'll see more in rural communities because those emissions do they deposit fairly quickly as they're emitted. A lot of the emissions from harvest activities are some of the bigger particles as well. You don't see a portion of them are the finer particles, what we call PM 2.5, and so they're definitely part of that picture as well. A lot of those particles are also some of the bigger particles, PM 10 or even bigger, and so that's the other kind of nuance with that as well. So, because of our challenge, we work at every level on every front. We leave no stone unturned. When it comes to looking for opportunities, this is one of those opportunities. But it is important also for people to understand that in some of those peak urban environments, that these aren't necessarily the biggest sources, as far as contributors at some of those sites.
And this has concentrated on almond harvesting. has it been extended to pistachios and walnuts? Or
Yeah.
at this point, are you just?
Through the chair. Yeah. So we're definitely open to looking at other activities. Almonds are kind of unique in some ways just because of the number of acres as well as the difference in harvesting practices. Pistachios, for example, are harvested, quite a bit differently than almonds. You don't go through the same drying on the ground and, kind of like sweeping pickup type activities. They're generally actually a lot less emissions, say from pistachio harvesting as compared to almond harvesting. But we're certainly open, like walnut, for example, is something that we've looked at in the past and are open to working with some of but the activities are quite a bit different too, between say almond and pistachio, where it's just a whole different process that doesn't involve the same kind of sort of, I'll just call dusty sort of process of. And I do see, by the way, one last comment on that through the chair is that there are some transitions that are happening in the almond sector. So Todd recognized is talking about some of the different equipment. The equipment changes that are happening are part of a broader kind of change in at least in some parts of the almond industry that are looking at actually, like actually changing the way that trees are actually planted or grown and set up to where you can actually do some of the other things that maybe you're seeing in some of the other crop categories where you don't necessarily. You can actually pick almonds up, even before they hit the ground. There's other ways of sweeping. There's combination equipment. So there are different practices that are also being. It's not just about having lower dust as you're doing the exact same process. You're seeing a change in the way that almond orchards are being planted, grown, and then ultimately harvested as well. Sometimes in ways that actually can mirror pistachio, for example, that's been doing a different process for quite a bit of time.
And the last question. Eventually, do you see the ultimate goal or a situation to where we're going to see mandates as it relates to the type of equipment that's being used to deal with this situation?
Yeah, our approach,
like wood burning and that type of thing. Is that
through the chair? Yeah, and I mean we've been very consistent on this point in that we have a multifaceted approach of working with the almond and other ag sectors through a combination of our conservation management practice program, which is a menu-based approach where almond and other sectors they basically work with us, USDA, backed by research, to have a variety of different measures, including, by the way, low dust nut harvesters to reduce dust. That's on the regulatory front, but it's a menu-based approach with a lot of flexibility in terms of what growers can select. Then we do incentive-based, as we talked about today, and then we do a lot of education and outreach. So we're partnering with, so that's a multifaceted approach that we've included in our plans and that we're very happy to work with ag to promote. And there's no proposed change to that other than continuing to do more research, find more funds, and just keep taking advantage of the latest information to effectively reduce these emissions.
No more questions. We'll go ahead and move on to, thank you, sir. We'll go ahead and move on to the item number 12, new district public website. Heather?
Hello, thank you. A lot of talk about dust. I can tell you something that isn't dusty. Our website. Not anymore. Yes, program manager. I'm Heather Hanks, Outreach and Communications. It's my pleasure to give you a brief tour of our new website. There you see it on the screen. Just take a moment and take it in. It's lovely. I agree. One of the things you'll notice is what our project was service driven. Our goal was to enhance accessibility, efficiency, and security for the public members of and everyone, stakeholders using our website. Go ahead and pause it. This is what we call owned media. In the world of marketing and advertising and public relations that my team works in, our owned media is something we control, and it's definitely where we can influence the brand. And that's what you're seeing today. At the top, first thing you see, the most searched things that come up on a website: about, search permits, employment, payment. And then, of course, just call us if you really don't want to dig through the website. But I find that people are enjoying the new look. Go ahead and continue. Part of what happened behind the scenes that you didn't see was a big lift by all the teams in the district. We have moved fully to a content management system that allows us to be efficient, update the website from various teams, and do it quickly. Go ahead and pause it again. We had a really good discussion last November with the governing board about Air Now and our public facing tools. And you'll see prominently, we are now incorporating Air Now on the website and in our outreach materials and the conversations we have. Go ahead. The entire, and you can search by county just like you would and get the local AQI. The entire website is sort of drawn by a navigation you see in this blue bar at the top. Those are all the different divisions, if you will, that we have, and we've organized the information based on the user, trying to make it streamlined and simple for the kind of activities the public will come and use here at our website. Also, something we've enjoyed and created is what you will a landing page. This little gray box, and each of those divisions has one, and it kind of gives you a chance, go ahead and pause it, to look at the various things and get a little bit more depth of detail than just the name on a menu on the left side like we used to have. Continue. In the process, we enhanced accessibility. We definitely created a divisional roadmap that guides you through the services we provide. And we're very responsive. One of my favorite features moving forward is the fact that you can open this up on a phone. And I'll display that in just a second. Go ahead and pause it. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. First, I want to show we have a centralized calendar. Very easy to get to, one click from the main website, and it will host all of the things, including today's meeting, right there in one place. You can also go ahead and press play, click it, and it'll take you to the agenda item and the other things you might need. So within 2 clicks, you're ready to roll for any meeting. And then, of course, as I was sneakily leading to, my favorite piece, 2 pieces are language. We've added multiple different languages. That's on every page. You can actually click through that and select the language and then keep the website in that language. And then you can pull it up on a phone, any mobile device. Before, you had to kind of zoom in and move around, and it was a little bit clunky. Now it optimizes for the device that you pull it up on. And all of that information is available in the same fashion that it would be on a desktop. Something to note, more than 60%, probably closer to 65% of our user base actually does access our website from a phone, from a mobile device, and not a desktop computer. So that optimization was critical. The other thing that we're really happy about is having a content management system supported by a major company in the IT world allows us to grow with them. They will continue refining and improving the content management and the way we approach our website. So now we are set to roll and move forward for a good chunk of time.
And just one last closing comment to the chair is, you all here are just a resource to the district in terms of constituents that you work with, talk to. And so, we've launched a new website. It's been basically just full positive reviews so far. But as we keep moving in our collective journey here, it's a continuously improving resource as well. I mean, so please let us know if, as you work with folks, if there's ever any ideas for improvement. We have an amazing in-house team that can just make changes basically on the fly to keep being responsive to those that we serve. And so please share this news with those that you work with. And if you have any ideas, don't hesitate to let us know. And we're always happy to make constant improvement to our resources here.
At this point, could I ask one question?
Sure.
You indicated different languages.
Yes.
But you went through it real quick.
Apologies.
Could you show us what languages?
Currently, there is, we can pull it back up maybe to the video. There's Spanish, Punjabi, Hmong, Arabic, and one more, I believe. There's 5. There's 2 kinds of Punjabi.
Yeah, what's interesting, so we've kind of did it so
it.
far based on, some of the work that we've done in the past to see kind of where different populations are in the valley. But the great thing about that tool is that we can continue actually adding over time. So I think if you feel like there's a missing demographic there, I mean, just we're all ears. And I believe already, this is a video that was produced for our board meeting. I believe our current webpage already has additional languages on it, our live page. I mean,
such as Portuguese.
Portuguese. I should have guessed.
Yeah.
That's the 3rd most spoken language in the world, if I'm not mistaken, something of that nature. Not that I keep track.
We can certainly look into that for sure. Thank you.
Any other questions here in Fresno?
I have.
Sorry.
I just want to congratulate you at the opportunity to go through the new website.
Oh, good.
And not criticizing the old website, but it's just this one is an improvement. I was able to go directly
to what you needed
through the bar on the top to what I needed, as opposed to looking at the sidebar and trying to
Oh, that is wonderful feedback. There's a lot of ears that are listening that really appreciate that feedback. Thank you. Yeah, we
Well,
worked hard.
I'll tell you, for me, and I get confused easily. But
So do I.
I just want to thank you and
Thank you.
the team at the district for putting together this version of the website. It's excellent.
Thank you. One thing that governing board asked that I'll note here that I didn't mention in the presentation is we still have all that functionality when we enter into air quality episodes. When we call an advisory and alert, we have the banner functions that pop up at the top of our page and appear throughout the pages if we are in fact in a situation.
Ms. Brown?
I was just going to tag on to that too. I really appreciate the update on the website. It is lovely. So
Thank
and
you. I
easy to
agree.
maneuver, because I will admit in the past, whenever I was looking for something, I just go straight to the search bar. and
Exactly.
type it in. So this is,
I'm glad you found an actual, you clicked in and didn't have to search.
so please let your team know that it's been a world of difference.
Thank you. And on that note, search actually has been updated too. So hopefully even when you do search, it's a little bit better.
Any other comments in Fresno? We'll go ahead and move to the north. Are there any comments in the north? Seeing none. Are there any comments in the south? Seeing none, I'll just end with this. I too appreciate the functionality and the focus on the phone. We're not always next to our laptops or computers, so that's a good way to pull it up anywhere, anytime, and get that type of information. So thank you for making that a priority as well. I do have a question though. Do you have like a social media post, kind of like maybe even like something like your presentation that we can share to the public to kind of go over those things?
By all means, I can create that. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for your presentation. We'll go ahead and go to item 13, AB 617 implementation updates. Stephanie?
Before we throw Stephanie up here, just wanted to make a quick announcement through the chair. So Jessica Olson, our current director of community strategy and resources, she's actually this is her last week here with the district. She's got some grand plans and moving out of the region and doing some really cool stuff. We went through recruitment, recently appointed Stephanie to actually be her replacement effective soon when Jessica is basically gone. So I just wanted to congratulate her and just make sure everybody here was aware that Stephanie is going to be that new director and is going to do a great job. She's doing really amazing work in that program. So go ahead, Stephanie.
Thanks, Samir, for that official introduction. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the CAC. My name is Stephanie, Program Manager, and then we'll be Director officially like on Saturday after Jess leaves. Here to provide you an update on AB 617 implementation since our last meeting. Of course, we continue to meet with all 4 of our CARB selected community steering committees to implement AB 617 across the whole valley. As a reminder, those 4 communities are South Central Fresno, Shafter, Stockton, and Arvin-Lamont. I'm super excited because tomorrow we're headed to Stockton for an in-person meeting, which is planned in partnership with the Port of Stockton and also the City of Stockton and other community organizations to highlight really all the progress on the implementation of the SERP that we've been able to accomplish thus far. These in-person meetings, I've mentioned it before, but they're really great and important opportunity for us to meet face-to-face with our committee members and really help us push forward that SERP implementation in our 617 communities. Another update for you, this past Saturday, we were at Hidalgo Elementary, which is in South Central Fresno, planting 166 trees along Highway 180 in partnership with Tree Fresno, Caltrans, and then also the City of Fresno. This effort was a part of our vegetative barriers measure in South Central Fresno. And to continue this work, Tree Fresno has a ton of additional plantings coming soon in coordination with schools, agencies like Caltrans, and a lot of businesses, including Caglia Environment, OK Produce, Producers Dairy, just to name a few. So we're really excited for the upcoming work to continue planting trees in the community and finish out this measure. And unfortunately, for the CARB update, our CARB representative wasn't able to join us in person today, but they are going to share updates via email through the clerk.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the north?
I have a quick comment because in Stockton, we successfully reallocated $4 million, I believe, from the heavy duty truck measure to the vehicle replacement, when vehicle replacement, I think, was running out of funds from the local district. The comment I want to make is vehicle replacement in these areas of lower economic wealth provides a significant economic benefit. So sometimes I'm not always convinced of the environmental health effects, like on mortality or morbidity of some of these rules and measures. But that is, in fact, a very important factor that, just like the aesthetics with urban greening and vegetative areas, that I think we can take into consideration.
To the chair, yeah, we definitely agree with that, and especially in an environment, where it's just continued spikes in energy prices and ongoing difficulty with affordability. I think those types of programs, we absolutely just environmental benefit, but also just real game changers for households that are facing just continued significant increases due to various policies.
Any other questions in the north? Seeing none. Any questions in the south? I think I see none. Sorry, you guys are really small on the screen. Any questions, Mr. Medeiros?
Yeah, just quick one. I'm curious, what kind of trees are planted? Are they almonds or pistachios or anything?
That's a really great question. Typically the types, I don't know the exact species, but typically they are not like fruit bearing tree. They're plants that are like evergreen. They're non-invasive. They have types of, they are ones that are drought tolerant as well. So those are the types of species. They have some flexibility to be able to plant, types of trees that fall into those categories, but it's not almonds or maybe fruit bearing trees though.
Any other questions here in Fresno? Thank you so much and congratulations. Item 14, Outreach and Communications Report. Jamie?
Good morning, everyone, and happy April Fool's Day. I should have punked you guys somehow. The big thing, the website, you just had a presentation about that. That's up and running. We're very excited about it. The team continues to do quite a bit of school outreach. If you have a school that you are working with, let us know. We can check to see if they're one of our Healthier Living School partners and kind of what their involvement is. That program involves everything from signing schools up to get notifications when air quality is poor, providing signage to reduce idling during pickup and drop off, and then in school presentation and activities, we have kind of a matching game for the little ones when we go to elementary schools and we talk to them, we have a little bit more of a science-based activity for the older kids. We go out and do presentations to parent groups, parent coffees, teachers, administrators. So our team really is working hard to make sure that schools are plugged in and involved with some of the issues that we're dealing with, in addition to being aware of those grant programs that perhaps schools can take advantage of. We are in April, and April is a big month for May for outreach events. It's kind of the time that everyone's having an outreach event. It is Earth Day. We're going into Air Quality Awareness Week. The Bike to Work activities will be happening. If you are aware of an outreach activity, we would love to be a part of it. Reach out to us and we'll see if we can get staff out to table a booth and give out information. We'd be happy to do that. Just because we have a little bit of time, I want to remind everyone, we have a really robust social media strategy. If you aren't following us on any of the variety of if you're on social media, if you aren't, good for you. And you should not change that. But if you are on social media, we're on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter. LinkedIn is becoming more and more of kind of the place to go to not have a lot of the riffraff. And next door, YouTube, and then we're kind of always watching some of the new things as they percolate up and might jump on board with those if they get super popular. But we post regularly, and it tends to be a lot of great content, including information about our many grant programs and information about when our team might be out in the field. At a tree planting event or at boothing at one of your events. So Valley Air District or Valley Air are the two handles you can search for, and we'd love for you to follow us. Last but not least, if you are a member of some type of group that does maybe monthly meetings, we also have a team that goes and does presentations. It can be as simple as Air Quality 101, what's happening in the valley, or as a focus, sometimes we'll actually go and talk to maybe a certain group about certain compliance issues so they can be educated about rules and regulations. We'd be happy to do that. Our team goes out on a regular basis, if not a daily basis, definitely on a weekly basis, and we'd love to be out at your event. With that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the north? Seeing none, are there any questions in the south? Seeing none, are there any questions here in Fresno? Mr. Maderos?
Just a comment, the International Agri Center is having a California antique farm equipment show from April 11th to April 13th. You said if there's anything where you could have outreach, I thought I'd just bring that to mind. If you want to contact them directly, I'm sure it'd be the same contact information for the World Ag Expo. I know that's short notice, but
we'll look into it. And I love a good antique show.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item 15, CAC member comments. Are there any member comments in Modesto? Seeing none, are there any member comments in Bakersfield?
Yes, this is Fernando. Can we get a copy of that CARB letter that was sent to Ms. Brown regarding forklift rule?
Yes, that will be sent out to the CAC members.
Thank you.
Any other comments in Bakersfield? Any CAC member comments here in Fresno?
I have a comment. I've got a comment also.
Mr. Tristo?
Mine's short.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, mine's all around 6'2".
I just want to congratulate our new chair on running an excellent meeting and doing a fine job.
Thank you. For your kind words. I butchered a couple of names, but sorry about that.
I wanted to, through the chair, to just make a comment based on what we went through earlier, that it's important for the CAC member groups to elect the chair. And then second, perhaps at our next meeting, we could ask the district to devote some resources to changing the bylaws of the CAC so that it's clear that action can be taken with the form of those membership, not necessarily a CAC membership. Then that in the absence of the chair of the CAC, that the chair of the interest group will fill in for the remainder of the term.
Through the chair, we're happy to work with the chair and the members to explore some of those potential enhancements. So appreciate that.
Is there usually a vice chair of the interest groups? Is that something that is normally done?
Traditionally, it's been, the vice chair essentially is the chair of that interest group. And in the event that the appointed chair can't make the meeting. But I think if there's other ideas certainly the priority in this case per Mr. Tristow's suggestion would be to make sure every interest group has a chair. But then if other enhancements are desired by the members with respect to making sure you have a effective vice chair kind of, role in the bylaw, that's certainly something that, could be up for discussion as well. Along with any other, like the voting recommendation or any other changes like that. We're happy to explore those.
Definitely sounds like something that we need to explore a little further.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other members or any other comments in Fresno? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 11:33. That might be a record. I'm not sure.
Through the chair, we do have item 16. We need somebody to volunteer to present at the governing board meeting.
Yes, that part. Is there a volunteer?
Through the chair, I just wanted to know, I know Mr. Cunha does come to, I think, all the board meetings and generally volunteers. We're happy to check with him if you'd like to see if he's willing to do it and then let you know if he's not. Or you can maybe just get a different volunteer if somebody's willing to do that today. We'll just leave. I just want to note that he's traditionally been willing and it does come to the meeting. So
I would say to go ahead and connect with him and see if he's willing to do that. But if he's not, maybe we should have a backup just in case. Is there anyone else that's willing to volunteer? All right, I guess that would be me. So hopefully Manuel can make it. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 11:34. And our next meeting will be May 6th at 10 a.m. here.